Like a finely tuned athlete, John explodes out of the blocks in his biography about Jesus with some pretty bold statements. It's enough to get your mind racing, and hopefully this short talk will help to stimulate further thought in our pursuit of the real Jesus. You might recall from the introduction video that this is a series tracing through the events of Jesus' life as recorded by John, someone who would have seen or been told firsthand many of the things he now reports in his book. We're working through one bit in each chapter, beginning right here with chapter 1. And John wastes little time putting us right into the heart of the action as he begins with the following words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Take a moment to reflect over those words on the screen. What are your first impressions, I wonder? There's a couple of key things we're told here, things that take us back in time, and I mean right back, before anything else. It is repeated there on 2 occasions that in the beginning was the Word. This Word was right there with God before all time began. In fact, more than that, the Word was God. And do you know what God did in the beginning? He was a creating God. These words now link the Word to the creating God from the beginning. This is astounding. This Word has got to be something special, a real headline grabber if ever there was one. But perhaps one of the most astonishing phrases of this first chapter comes a little further on. If we skip down a couple of sentences to verse 14, it says there, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." Whooshka! How about that? After all that has just been said about him, this Word, well God in fact, it's saying, became flesh, like one of us, and lived on planet Earth. Wow! That should echo more in our mind than any gunshot to begin a race. See, do you ever think that God might just be a distant figure, looking down on you, but not really having any involvement? Have you ever wanted God just to show himself to be real sometime? Well, now we know he did. John smashes to smithereens the idea that God is distant and does not show himself to us. This Word makes him known, and if we had been around at the right time, we could have seen him in human flesh. Thankfully, John and others have given us some good records of this to go by. And as you may well have guessed by now, reading on through the chapter, it makes it clear that this Word being written about here is Jesus. Jesus, God in flesh, coming to earth and roaming around in real time and real places, as we'll discover over the course of this series. But what's it saying here about Jesus? Let's just recap from these first few words of the book, where it's saying that Jesus was there at the beginning of time, saying that all things were made through Jesus, and it's saying that Jesus is God. They are some amazing claims. Had you ever considered those things about Jesus before? Perhaps this has given you a fresh or a new understanding of just who Jesus is and why he might be so important. This is a landmark time in history being described. In the whole of John chapter 1, if you were to read it, the story of a guy called John the Baptist occupies a fair bit of the space. But he was only a prelude, a bit like the pre-game entertainment perhaps, but not the real action. The real thing, the one they'd all been waiting for, was Jesus. Now John was announcing his arrival. And like the build-up to a grand final, the anticipation had been building for a long time. But now here he is. By the end of the chapter, Jesus has already generated a real stir and got a following from a range of different people. But what about us? There is plenty here to be thinking about. It might be that this talk has just raised more questions for you. that's okay. Feel free to drop us a line and we can have a chat. Or hopefully things will become clearer as we work through the rest of this series. We just want to make sure we don't miss out on who Jesus really is. See, in John chapter 1, his arrival is announced. But there were people there who were there at the time that did not recognise him. They failed to see Jesus for who he really was. And it's a fatal mistake. Jesus is no ordinary man. He is God, creator of all things, and he came into our world. We know where to look now to find God. He is worthy of our attention. We need to think about what this might mean for you and for me. See, Jesus didn't just come for the sake of it. He came for a purpose. You read through John chapter 1, you'll see some of the things he came to achieve. We'll be looking at some of them in the talks ahead, and it will definitely be a journey worth following, a race worth running right through to the finish.